Erica, how much have books been a part of your life? Storytelling and writing. When did this all start for you?
I think this all started when I was perhaps about 5 years old, when I was really able to start putting sentences together in reading. Uh, Books and storytelling is a part of my life. I'm originally from Jamaica, and the oral tradition in Jamaica is what we all grew up with. Our grandmothers and mother would sit with us on the porch, and they would tell us stories. So we started storytelling early, and being in a home where I had an aunt that was quintessential teacher. She was an educator for life. Books was everything to her, and she made sure that our homes was always packed with books.
Your first story in the book, Cousin Paige, was very important. Why did you choose that story to start with?
I chose that because growing up on an island, we didn't have a lot of material things. What we had was family and friends. So we never had sleepovers. We had visits to our cousin's home. We would play a lot. We didn't buy our toys, we made them. So going by the river, even when we were told sometimes you can't go to the pond, that for us was what our life was all about. It was cousins and uncles and aunts and all our neighbors. So the story with her, she was one of the persons that I was closest with. And all the little things that happened on an island, like, playing with something you made that broke in the middle of playing and you had to stop and somebody blamed you for breaking it and you had to redo it. So it really was important to show the meaning of family and friends in growing up because that's what it's all about.
Who did you like to read when you were young?
Nancy Drew. I just told you my age basically, but I'm a Nancy Drew girl. Anything that was written that had to do with mystery or something that had to be solved, that was me. I would go to the little library in our village where I grew up, and Miss Manboard was the librarian, and I would say to her, I need more books. I would literally read all the books that was in the library because it was a very small library, but I was also from a small town, so for me, that's what it was. So my aunt always gave us encyclopedias that sometimes I couldn't even pronounce the words. But for me, it was the Nancy Drew series, Robert Louis Stevenson as well, poems and poetry, Colleen Brown. When I was a little girl, I was reading uh, poetry. So for me, that was how books and the kind of books that I read made me who I am today. I'm now writing a book myself.
Did you journal when you were younger or write short stories, or how did the whole process of writing begin for you?
I started writing very early. I did write a lot of journals because I was always concerned that my brothers would find it and read it.
No diaries.
So no diary. So I was kind of a little smarter then, and I'm like, no, I'm not writing it because I know my brothers, they're gonna read it. But what I did instead was I wrote plays. And my mom reminded me, I can't believe that I forgot myself, but my mom reminded me one day about 2 years ago. She said, Erica, the first time you wrote a play, you were about 13 years old. And I had absolutely forgotten about this. And she reminded me, and then it started coming back to me while I was writing my own book. She reminded me of a play that I not only wrote, but I produced and I cast it. And we performed it on stage at our church. And I remember reading a book called The Cross and the Switchblade. And I was so moved by it. It was a story about a young man who had got into the overall crowd and had become a part of a gang. And through Christianity, he was able to turn his life around because my life was based, mostly on church. And my mom said, yes, I remember when you wrote that play and you were on stage, and then it came back to me. So I started writing plays from early and directing and producing. Even then, I was 13 years old. And then when I was 18, I wrote a little bit more. I wrote a song that I performed on stage at one of our high school performances. So for me, it wasn't so much journaling, it was more writing plays and more dramatic pieces.
Now, this is related to a memoir. Why did you want to write this? What was your inspiration?
I when I moved to this country 16 years ago, I wanted to do something in the field of education because I was so heavily influenced by my aunt I spoke about earlier, Aunt Vin, who was all about education, and she made us understand quite clearly that the only way to move forward was through education. So when I moved to this country, I wanted to do something in education. So I did my master's actually in education because I wanted to get a more broader understanding from an intellectual point of view about education and how it works and so on. So I went into education and I worked in two high schools over 2 years. Uh, so I got a feel of learning and understanding a little bit more about the different types of learning. And I remember in one of the teachers, Dr. Klein, she wanted me to talk to her students, just to give a brief lecture on the diaspora of language in the Caribbean, because her students were reading a book that was written by a Caribbean writer, and they couldn't grasp, the content as well, because the language was, Caribbean, it was a little more Creole, and they couldn't understand. And then she said, I want you to talk to my students. And I went in and I spoke to them, and they enjoyed it so much because it was relatable. They knew me, and like I could explain to them from a person that was not only a lay person but also a native Caribbean person. So they really enjoyed the stories, and they would come to my office and they would say, "Tell me more about what happened, in your life. I heard you speak about so and so," and they were enthralled by it. And they were high school students. And I flash back to just moving to this country and talking about my life and how I grew up. And so many of friends of mine who were my peers were, really riveted to my stories, and they wanted to hear more because they weren't familiar with that kind of living and the interesting way that our lives, came together as children. So when I listened to the students wanting to learn more and heard my peers wanting to know more, I thought, I have to write this book, because the fundamental thing was I promised my mom when I was about 10 years old that one day I want to write a book. So that was it for me. With the idea in the back of my mind that I want to write this book for my mom and the interest that was gathered, I thought, you have to read this book.
How has your mom received it? What does she think? Of course, she might be a little biased, right?
My mom is an interesting person. When my mom gets very quiet, it's when she's most impacted. When it's something that's superficial that she wants to, kind of be the mom, she's a lot more vocal. And my mom, I can feel it, how impacted it is, because she has both copies of the book, which is the same, just different covers, and she will smile at me. She will hug me. She will say, "I knew it." And for me, those are the kind of things that said to me. She doesn't want to sound as if, she's making a lot more about me than, all the other siblings, because we've all done different things in our lives and we've all accomplished much in our own way. But this is perhaps the most, exposed of all of them. And that's my mom wanting to say to me, "I knew it, I knew you would do it. I can't believe you did it, but I knew you would," that kind of
Right.
But at the same time, not wanting to sound as if she's lauding one more than the other, because she always wanted us to know that we were all equally loved. So for my mom, I think she's very happy.
And I think she's taught you all a lot about humility.
Oh, oh my goodness. It was everything to her was the other person. Take yourself away. Even if you're right, you have to walk away from it sometimes. And even though we wrestled as siblings, we all wrestled. We're like, no, if I'm right, I want them to know that I'm right. And she said, yes, you can. But at the same time, walk away from it. If you do something, remember the next person. Remember to always know that there is a bigger purpose, because my mom is so very religious. So her life and what she taught us was the next person. It's never about you. It's about the next person. It's about caring about somebody else. Perhaps even a little more than yourself sometimes, whilst you love yourself. And that philosophy is what I think made all of us as siblings, not just me. I'm speaking of because I have this book. But she taught all of us the same thing. Just just remember there's a bigger person. And it was always that, God has a plan for all of us. So take yourself out. So it's really, when something like a book happens to someone, with the tutelage of my mom and the leading of my mom, it is no longer about me. It is about how I can influence someone else, how I can inspire someone else. The book, the idea of the book is help somebody else on their journey as they figure out their own lives. So yeah.
That leads me to my next question. How do you hope this book will impact your readers?
I hope that when someone reads my book, that they will walk away appreciating their life a little bit more and would want to give a hand to somebody else who needs it. Just to understand that whatever my situation is, I should be grateful. I should be thankful. And if there's someone else that I can help, I should reach out. Because it doesn't matter what our circumstances, we get enthralled and enwrapped in what we have without sometimes sitting back and hearing a story that's different. A story that is perhaps less or more captivating, but a story that says, I'm thankful, I'm grateful. And that thing that I wanted to do for 10 years that I thought I could never do, after reading this book, I think I want to try. So that's what I